Nobody could explain why Rex went insane that Saturday afternoon. One second the retired German shepherd was calmly watching children laugh at a community festival. The next, he was tearing into a blue bear mascot with the fury of a dog possessed, his jaws locked onto fuzzy fabric, while parents screamed and children scattered in terror. Lieutenant Sarah Chen had partnered with Rex for 8 years. She'd seen him face down armed criminals, detect hidden explosives, and track fugitives through miles of wilderness. But she'd never seen him attack an innocent performer, entertaining kids at a family event. Rex wasn't crazy, though. He wasn't confused or aggressive or suffering from some age-related breakdown that might explain his shocking behavior. Rex was trying to save lives. Hidden inside that cheerful costume was something that would expose a child trafficking network spanning 7 states, rescue 23 stolen children, and prove that sometimes the most loyal hearts see dangers that human eyes completely miss. The autumn sun painted everything in liquid gold that Saturday afternoon, casting long shadows across the community festival grounds like nature's own spotlight. Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked slowly through the maze of carnival booths, her hand resting gently on the leash attached to Rex, her 11-year-old German shepherd, whose graying muzzle couldn't hide the sharp intelligence that still burned in his amber eyes. At 34, Sarah had seen enough darkness in her 12 years of police work to appreciate moments like these. The air was thick with the scent of caramel apples and kettle corn, punctuated by the distant squeaks of the bouncy castle and the delighted screams of children racing between game booths. Rex walked beside her with the calm dignity of a veteran, his ears occasionally twitching at particularly loud bursts of laughter from the nearby face-painting station. "Easy day, old man," Sarah murmured, scratching behind his ear as they paused near the ring toss. "Just some community relations, a few photos, maybe steal some cotton candy when no one's looking." Rex's tail swayed once in response, but his eyes never stopped scanning. Even in retirement, some habits died hard. The festival was exactly what their small Tennessee community needed. Families spread across picnic blankets, teenagers clustered around the dunk tank, elderly couples sharing funnel cakes on wooden benches. Sarah's radio crackled occasionally with routine check-ins from patrol units, but nothing that demanded her attention. This was supposed to be the easy assignment, the kind that made good headlines and better memories. That's when growl building deep in his chest like thunder before a storm. The blue bear mascot had been making its rounds through the children's area, waving oversized paws and distributing candy from a bucket. Parents smiled and snapped photos as kids hugged the plush figure. It looked like every other festival mascot Sarah had ever seen, harmless, cheerful, designed to bring joy. Rex didn't see it that way. The German shepherd lunged forward with a force that nearly knocked Sarah off her feet, his leash going taut as a guitar string. But this wasn't the random aggression of an aging dog losing his faculties. This was surgical, purposeful, the same controlled intensity she'd seen him display during his years of active duty. His jaws locked onto the mascot's blue, fuzzy arm with the precision of a steel trap. The impact sent the performer staggering backward, arms windmilling for balance as Rex's 90 pounds of determined fury drove him toward the ground. Chaos erupted like a bomb going off. Children's laughter turned to screams in an instant. A mother's iced coffee exploded against the pavement as she dropped it, rushing to pull her toddler away from the scene. Popcorn scattered across the grass like confetti, as vendors and parents alike scrambled to understand what was happening. "Rex, off!" Sarah's voice cut through the pandemonium like a rifle crack, her command voice honed by years of patrol work. But even as she shouted, part of her hesitated. Rex had never, not once in all their years together, attacked without cause. The Mascot was screaming now, muffled sounds of panic filtering through the oversized bare head as Rex maintained his grip. The dog's eyes were focused, alert, showing none of the confusion or aggression of a random attack. He was doing exactly what he'd been trained to do: neutralize a threat. But what threat could a festival mascot possibly pose? Sarah grabbed Rex's collar, her fingers finding the pressure point that would force him to release. He obeyed, but slowly, deliberately, as if he wanted to make sure his message had been received. When he finally let go, he backed away with measured steps, his body still coiled and ready, ears flat against his skull. The Mascot crumpled to his knees, clutching his arm and moaning through the foam head. Festival staff rushed forward, unsure whether to help the injured performer or restrain the dog. Sarah clipped Rex's leash back on with hands that barely trembled, her training overriding the confusion and embarrassment burning in her chest. "I'm so sorry," she called out to the Mascot, but something felt wrong about the apology. Aftermath. Sarah felt the weight of certainty settling in her chest like a stone. Rex hadn't made a mistake. In 11 years of partnership, through drug busts and bomb threats, through crowd control and evidence searches, Rex had never been wrong. Whatever he'd sensed in that Mascot, whatever had triggered every instinct honed by years of training and experience, it wasn't paranoia or age-related confusion. It was a warning. The festival coordinator arrived like a hurricane wrapped in a red windbreaker, her face flushed with anger and panic. Margaret Holbrook had been organizing community events for 15 years, and in all that time she'd never had to deal with what she was already calling the dog attack incident. "Officer Chen, I need that animal off my grounds immediately," she hissed, her voice low, but carrying the kind of authority that came from handling crises. "We have liability issues, insurance concerns, and about 50 parents who just watched your dog maul a children's performer." Sarah kept her voice steady, professional. "Mrs. Holbrook, I understand your concerns, but Rex didn't maul anyone. The performer appears to be uninjured, and uninjured," Margaret's voice rose an octave. "He's being treated by paramedics right now. We're getting calls from news stations. This is going to be all over social media within the hour." Sarah glanced toward the medical tent that had been hastily erected near the main stage. 2 EMTs were examining the Mascot's arm, while he remained seated on a folding chair, still refusing to remove the oversized bare head, despite their obvious frustration. Something about that struck her as odd, but she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Rex paced beside her, his usual post-incident calm nowhere to be found. Instead, he whined softly, occasionally looking up at Sarah, as if trying to communicate something urgent. His ears twitched at every sound, his head turning to track movement throughout the festival grounds, with an alertness she hadn't seen since his active duty days. "Look," Sarah said, pulling her attention back to Margaret. "I take full responsibility for what happened. Rex is a retired canine officer with an exemplary service record. He's been to dozens of community events without incident. If he reacted this way, there had to be a reason. The reason is that he's an old dog who probably shouldn't be around children," Margaret snapped, then immediately looked apologetic. "I'm sorry, Officer Chen. I know you care about him, but from a liability standpoint, I can't have him here. Not after this." More smartphones appeared. Their own Mascot had disappeared behind the medical tent. Sarah felt her professional embarrassment giving way to something else entirely. Trust. She'd built her career on reading people, on recognizing when something didn't add up. And right now, everything about Rex's behavior suggested he'd encountered something that set off every alarm bell in his highly trained nervous system. The paramedics emerged from behind the medical tent looking frustrated. One of them approached Sarah with a clipboard. "Excuse me, officer, but the victim is refusing further medical treatment. Won't even let us properly examine the injured area. Says he's fine and just wants to leave." "Did you see the bite marks?" Sarah asked. The paramedic shook his head. "That's the thing. He won't remove the costume. Says it's too damaged to take off safely. But from what we could see through the torn fabric, there's no visible injury. Maybe some bruising, but nothing that would require treatment." Sarah frowned. "No puncture wounds? No bleeding?" "Nothing we could see. Your dog's got good bite inhibition. I'll give him that. Looks like he was more interested in restraining than injuring." As if he'd heard his name, Rex suddenly stopped pacing and sat directly in front of Sarah, his eyes locked on hers. She'd seen this look before, the same intense focus he'd shown when alerting to explosives or narcotics. He was trying to tell her something, and she was finally ready to listen. "Mrs. Holbrook," Sarah said, her voice taking on the authoritative tone she used during interrogations. "I'd like to speak with the performer before he leaves. Get a statement for the incident report." "He's already gone," Margaret replied, gesturing toward the parking area. "Left through the back gate about 5 minutes ago. Didn't even wait for his payment." Sarah's pulse quickened. In 12 years of police work, she'd learned that people who fled scenes, even victims, usually had something to hide. "Did he leave any personal information? Contact details? We'll need it for the report." Margaret consulted her clipboard, flipping through several pages before shaking her head. "That's odd. The booking form just has a company name, Rainbow Entertainment Solutions, and a phone number. No individual name, no permanent address." Rex whined again, a sound that seemed to echo Sarah's growing unease. She looked down at her partner, really seeing him for the first time since the incident. His body language wasn't that of a dog who'd made a mistake. It was the stance of a professional who'd done exactly what he was supposed to do. "I need to take Rex," mind already racing ahead to what she needed to do next. "Maybe," she called over her shoulder, "but Rex doesn't make mistakes." As they reached the parking lot, Rex suddenly stopped and looked back toward the festival grounds, his ears pricked forward. Sarah followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual, just families enjoying the autumn afternoon, the incident already becoming just another story to tell over dinner. But Rex saw something else, something that made the hair on his neck stand up and his tail go rigid. something that told Sarah this was far from over. The festival grounds looked different at 7:30 that evening, transformed from a place of laughter and light into something quieter, more contemplative. Most families had gone home for dinner, leaving behind only the cleanup crews and a few teenagers reluctant to let the day end. Sarah parked behind the community center, technically off duty but unable to shake the feeling that she'd missed something crucial. Rex stirred in the back seat of her truck, instantly alert despite having dozed during the drive back. He knew they were returning to the scene, and his body language shifted from relaxed companion to working dog in the span of seconds. "Easy, boy," Sarah murmured, clipping his leash. "We're just taking a look around." The area where the incident had occurred was still marked off with orange cones, though no one was actively guarding it. Sarah approached slowly, letting Rex lead the way. His nose immediately went to work processing scents and information that her human senses couldn't detect. She was looking for anything the Mascot might have left behind, anything that could explain Rex's violent reaction. The man had fled so quickly that surely he'd forgotten something, dropped something, left some trace of his presence beyond the trampled grass and scattered popcorn. Rex led her past the craft booths and game stations, his nose tracking a scent trail invisible to Sarah but apparently clear as a highway to him. They circled behind the main stage, past the generator trucks and storage trailers, until they reached the large green dumpster positioned behind the community center. That's when Rex froze, every muscle in his body going tense. A low growl built in his chest, not the explosive aggression from earlier but something more controlled, more purposeful. He was telling her they'd found what they were looking for. Sarah pulled a small flashlight from her jacket pocket and approached the dumpster cautiously. The smell hit her first, not just garbage, but something chemical, sharp and artificial, something that didn't belong among the coffee grounds and discarded paper plates. There, half buried under a pile of napkins and plastic cups, was a flash of blue fur. "Son of a bitch," Sarah whispered, pulling on the latex gloves she always carried. He ditched the costume. She carefully extracted the blue bare torso from the trash, her law enforcement training automatically kicking in. Evidence preservation, chain of custody, documentation, all the procedures she'd followed 1,000 times before. But as she held the costume up to her flashlight beam, her hands began to shake. Rex's growl intensified, his hackles rising as the scent grew stronger. He backed away from the costume, but kept his eyes locked on it, his body coiled and ready to spring. The Mascot head was missing, but the torso told a story that made Sarah's blood run cold. The fabric where Rex had bitten was torn, revealing not just foam padding but something else, something intentionally hidden. With trembling fingers, she felt along the interior lining until she found what Rex's sensitive nose had detected from 30 feet away. A zippered compartment, carefully sewn into the belly of the costume and designed to be completely invisible from the outside. The compartment was empty now, but the smell that rose from it when she opened the zipper made her stomach lurch. Sweet and sickly, with an underlying chemical burn that spoke of chloroform or something similar. Something designed to render a small person unconscious quickly and quietly. Sarah sat back on her heels, the implications hitting her like physical blows. This wasn't just a costume, this was a tool, a piece of equipment designed for a specific and horrifying purpose. Rex had known. Somehow, through scent or instinct, or the mysterious bond that connected working dogs to danger, he'd recognized this threat long before any human could have detected it. His attack wasn't aggression, it was prevention. She pulled out her phone and began taking pictures, documenting the costume, the hidden compartment, the chemical residue that stained the interior fabric. 12 years of police work had taught her to recognize predatory behavior, to spot the signs of someone hunting for victims. But she'd never seen anything like this. The level of planning, the sophistication of the disguise, the cold calculation required to walk among children and families while carrying the tools necessary to steal a child. It spoke of someone organized, experienced, and utterly without conscience. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You should have minded your own business." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes scanning the darkening festival grounds. Somewhere out there, someone was watching. Someone who knew she'd found the costume. Someone who understood exactly what that discovery meant. Rex moved closer to her, his warm bulk pressing against her leg, in a gesture of protection and partnership that transcended their years together. He'd done his job, sounded the alarm, tried to stop whatever had been planned for that afternoon. Now, it was her turn. Sarah carefully bagged the costume, sealing it in the evidence envelope she kept in her truck. Tomorrow, she'd run it through the proper channels, submit it to forensics, file her reports. But tonight, she had calls to make, databases to search, patterns to uncover. Because Rex had just uncovered something that went far beyond a single incident at a community festival. This was organized, professional, and, if her instincts were right, it wasn't the first time someone had used a mascot costume to get close to children. As she loaded Rex into the truck, she caught sight of something that made her freeze. Across the parking lot, partially hidden behind a maintenance shed, a figure stood watching. Too far away to make out details, too careful to stay where the security lights couldn't reach, but close enough for Rex to catch the scent. The German Shepherd's growl was barely audible, but it carried a message that Sarah understood perfectly. The hunt had only just begun. The figure melted back into the shadows, but Sarah had seen enough. Someone was very interested in what she'd discovered, and that someone was still out there, still hunting, still planning, and now they knew she was hunting them back. The blue glow of Sarah's laptop screen cast stark shadows across her kitchen table at 2:15 in the morning. Her third cup of coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but she barely noticed. Spread across the table were printed screenshots, handwritten notes, and the evidence bag containing the mascot costume. A constellation of clues that should have led somewhere, but instead seemed to dissolve into digital smoke the deeper she dug. Rex hadn't settled once since they'd returned home. The 11-year-old German Shepherd paced restlessly between the kitchen and the hallway, his nails clicking against the hardwood floor, in a rhythm that matched Sarah's growing frustration. Every few minutes, he'd pause at the bottom of the stairs, leading to Emma's bedroom. Ears pricked forward, as if listening for threats that only he could detect. "Rainbow Entertainment Solutions," Sarah muttered, typing the company name into yet another search engine. The same worthless results populated her screen. A bare-bones website, with stock photos of smiling children and generic text about bringing joy to your special events. No employee names, no physical address, beyond a P.O. box in rural Kentucky. No business license on file with the state registry. She'd run the tax identification number through 3 different databases. Each search led to a different shell company, which led to another shell, which led to a registered agent service that specialized in helping people disappear into corporate anonymity. It was like chasing ghosts through a maze of legal loopholes. 12 years of police work had taught Sarah corporate search for Rainbow Entertainment. The registration was only 6 months old, filed by a law firm that specialized in corporate privacy services. The registered agent was a professional service that existed solely to shield the real owners from public scrutiny. The corporate address traced to a mail forwarding service. "Professional," she whispered, impressed despite herself. Someone had invested serious time and money into creating a business identity that could withstand casual scrutiny, while revealing absolutely nothing useful to law enforcement. Rex's pacing stopped abruptly. Sarah looked up, to find him standing at the foot of the stairs, his entire body rigid with attention, his ears swiveled like radar dishes, processing sounds beyond her human perception. After a long moment, he padded upstairs, and she could hear his nails clicking across Emma's bedroom floor as he settled into what had become his new sleeping position, directly between her 6-year-old daughter and the door. This was new behavior, and it worried her. In all their years together, Rex had never shown protective instincts toward Emma, beyond the general watchfulness any good family dog might display. But since the festival incident, he'd appointed himself as her personal guardian, following her from room to room and positioning himself strategically whenever she slept. Sarah turned back to her laptop, pulling up property records for the P.O. Box address in Kentucky. The building housed 47 different businesses, most of them obvious shells, holding companies, consulting services, import-export firms that had never imported or exported anything. It was a professional anonymity factory, the kind of place where criminal enterprises came to buy respectability. She cross-referenced the phone number from the festival booking form, disconnected, just as she'd expected. But the interesting part was the phone company's records. The number had been active for exactly 3 months before being canceled. Just long enough to book several events, collect deposits, and disappear. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she expanded her search. How many other entertainment companies followed similar patterns? How many other shell businesses specialized in children's events while maintaining no traceable corporate identity? The results made her blood run cold. Sunshine Party Services in Alabama, inactive website, disconnected phone, no business license. Happy Times Entertainment in Georgia, registered to the same Kentucky mail drop. Phone number out of service. Kids Dream Events in Florida, identical corporate structure, same law firm, same registered agent service. Sarah leaned back in her chair, the full scope of what she was uncovering settling in her chest like ice water. This wasn't some opportunistic predator using a costume as cover. This was a network, a coordinated operation that had been carefully planned and professionally executed across multiple states. Someone with serious resources was using children's entertainment as a hunting ground, creating shell companies that could book events, gain access to families, and disappear without a trace when things went wrong. The level of sophistication suggested either extensive criminal experience or professional training, possibly both. She created a new document and began mapping out the connections. Same registered agent, same law firm, same corporate structure repeated across at least 4 states. The patterns were too consistent to be coincidental. Rex's soft whine drifted down from Emma's room, and Sarah realized her hands were trembling as she typed. What had started as professional curiosity about Rex's unusual behavior had evolved into something much darker. She wasn't just investigating a single incident anymore. She was uncovering a predator network that had been operating under everyone's noses, using the very symbols of childhood joy, mascots, parties, festivals, as camouflage for something unspeakably evil. The laptop screen flickered as her internet connection wavered, and for a moment Sarah saw her own reflection staring back at her, hollow-eyed, exhausted, but determined. Rex had sounded the alarm, had tried to stop whatever had been planned at that festival. Now it was her job to figure out how deep this rabbit hole went, and who else might be in danger. Because one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. The Blue Bear mascot hadn't been working alone. Text message from unknown number. Her finger hovered over the screen for a heartbeat before tapping it open. What she saw made her coffee cup slip from her nerveless fingers. Ceramic, exploding against the hardwood floor in a spray of cold liquid and sharp fragments. 3 photographs of Emma, her 6-year-old daughter walking out of Riverside Elementary, her blonde pigtails bouncing as she skipped down the front steps. Emma climbing into Sarah's patrol car after school pickup last Tuesday. Emma playing on the swing set at Morrison Park, her face bright with laughter as she pumped her legs skyward. Photos taken without permission. We know where she is. We can reach her whenever we want. Below the images, a text in stark black letters. Don't dig deeper. Sarah's transformation was instantaneous and complete. 1 second she was Lieutenant Sarah Chen, methodical investigator following a trail of nearly dropped the phone. The rational part of her mind, the part trained by 12 years of law enforcement, screamed at her to preserve the evidence, to screenshot the images, to begin the systematic process of tracking the sender. But the mother in her, the primal protective instinct that lived deeper than training or procedure, could only stare at those photos and imagine what might have happened if she hadn't been there to pick Emma up, if she hadn't been watching. The sound of nails clicking rapidly down the stairs told her that Rex had sensed her distress from 2 floors away. The German Shepherd appeared in the kitchen doorway, took one look at Sarah's face, and immediately went into full alert mode. His hackles rose, his nose lifted to scent the air for threats, his body positioning itself between Sarah and the front door. "They know about Emma," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "They've been watching her." Rex moved closer, pressing his warm bulk against her leg, in a gesture that was part comfort, part protection. His amber eyes fixed on the phone screen, and a low growl built in his chest. Not the explosive aggression from the festival, but something deeper, more controlled. The sound of a professional who understood that the stakes had just been raised beyond anything they'd previously faced. Sarah's training finally kicked in, overriding the maternal terror that threatened to paralyze her completely. She forced her hands to steady as she took screenshots of the threatening images, her fingers moving through the familiar motions of evidence preservation, even as her mind raced ahead to immediate security concerns. Emma's school pickup routine would have to change immediately. No more walking to the patrol car alone. No more predictable schedules. No more assuming that the normal protections of small-town life were sufficient. Someone had been conducting surveillance on her family, mapping their routines, identifying vulnerabilities. She pulled up Emma's school contact information and fired off an email to the principal. Emma Chen will be picked up by authorized personnel only until further notice. No exceptions, no matter who claims to have permission. I'll provide an updated authorized list Monday morning. Next, she called her neighbor Janet Morrison, a retired teacher who often helped with Emma's after-school care. The phone rang 4 times before Janet's sleepy voice answered. "Sarah? Honey, it's almost 3 in the morning. Is everything okay?" "Janet, I need you to listen carefully. I'm involved in a case that might put Emma at risk. Can you take her for a few days while I sort this out?" The gravity in Sarah's voice cut through Janet's drowsiness immediately. "Of course. Should I come get her now?" "No. Wait until morning. I don't want to wake her, and I need tonight to make some arrangements." "But Janet..." "Immediately. Don't answer questions. Don't provide information. Don't assume they're legitimate just because they claim to be. Sarah, you're scaring me. What kind of case is this? Sarah looked down at the photos still glowing on her phone screen, at the evidence of someone stalking her child with professional patience and skill. The kind that targets families, she said quietly. The kind that uses children. After hanging up, she walked through the house methodically, checking locks, drawing curtains, activating the security system she'd installed but rarely used. Rex followed her every step, his presence both comforting and sobering. He'd been trying to warn her from the beginning, had sensed the threat before her human instincts could process it. How long had they been watching? How many photos did they have? How close had they come to Emma before Rex's attack at the festival disrupted their plans? The questions multiplied in her mind like cancer cells, each one spawning new fears, new scenarios that made her chest tighten with protective fury. What had started as professional curiosity about a shell company network had become intensely, terrifyingly personal. Someone had declared war on her family, and they'd done it with the cold precision of professionals who understood exactly how to manipulate a mother's worst fears. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated the bond between a K-9 officer and her partner, the instinctual communication that transcended normal human-animal relationships. Rex had detected their presence before they'd revealed themselves, had disrupted their plans before they could be executed. Sarah sank into her kitchen chair, Rex settling at her feet with his chin resting on her boots. The Mascot costume evidence bag lay across the table like an accusation, physical proof that someone had come armed with the tools necessary to steal a child from a crowded festival. Her child, her Emma, the personal, had just collided with the professional in the most dangerous way possible, and Sarah Chen was no longer just investigating a case. She was fighting for her daughter's life. At 4:30 a.m., Sarah's fingers finally stopped shaking, enough to dial the numbers she'd memorized, but hoped never to use. Marcus Rodriguez answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the early hour, a habit ingrained by 15 years of federal law enforcement that never fully went away. "Sarah, this better be life or death." "It is," she said simply, and something in her tone must have conveyed the gravity, because Marcus's entire demeanor shifted. "Talk to me." Sarah gave him the abbreviated names, registration numbers, the threatening text, all of it. "I'm calling my team lead in an hour." "Marcus, if this is as big as I think it is, it's bigger." His voice was grim. "Sarah, I've been working a task force for 18 months, tracking exactly what you're describing. We call them entertainment predators. Organized groups, using children's parties and public events as hunting grounds. We've got active cases in 12 states. Sarah felt the floor shift beneath her. 12 states? At minimum. The problem is they're smart, well-funded, and they move fast. By the time we identify one shell company, they've dissolved it and created 3 new ones. By the time we track a phone number, it's been disconnected. It's like fighting shadows. Sarah looked down at Rex, who had positioned himself so he could watch both the front door and the stairs leading to Emma's room. Rex knew, at the festival, he knew something was wrong before any human could have detected it. "Dogs don't lie," Marcus said, "and retired K-9s don't suddenly develop aggression problems. If Rex attacked, there was a reason. The question is whether they were targeting Emma specifically, or if she was just an opportunity." The thought sent ice water through Sarah's veins. "What do you mean?" "These networks do 2 kinds of hunting. Sometimes they target specific children, usually kids from law enforcement or military families, because taking a cop's kid sends a message and generates maximum media attention. Other times they're opportunistic, looking for any vulnerable target at public events. Sarah closed her eyes, processing the implications. The festival was advertised weeks in advance. If they were planning to grab someone there, they had plenty of time to research the attendees, including researching that a local canine officer would be doing community relations. Marcus paused, and Sarah could hear the clicking of computer keys. "Sarah, I'm looking at your service record. Bomb detection, narcotics, 3 commendations for officer assistance. Rex took down armed suspects twice during his active career. If someone researched you, they'd know your dog was trained for threat assessment. So, when Rex attacked the Mascot, he was doing exactly what he was trained to do: neutralize a threat to officer safety." Marcus's voice took on the hard edge of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's darker impulses. "The question is, what kind of threat requires that level of response?" Sarah looked at the evidence bag containing the Mascot costume, the kind that comes armed with chemical restraints and hidden compartments designed to conceal an unconscious child. Jesus. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. If this network has targeted your family specifically, they're not going to stop because you found one costume. These people are patient, well-organized, and they view law enforcement attention as a challenge, rather than a deterrent. So what do I do? First, you get Emma somewhere safe. And I mean really safe, not just staying with neighbors. Second, you go official with this immediately. File reports, get protective services involved. Create a paper trail that makes this someone else's problem if something happens to you. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn air. If something happens to me? Sarah, you've stumbled into the middle of a federal investigation. You found evidence that could potentially unravel months of their work. You've disrupted an operation they've probably been planning for weeks. From their perspective, you're not just a local cop who got lucky. You're a direct threat to their entire network. She looked at the text messages on her phone, at the photos of Emma that someone had taken with the patience of a professional surveillance team. They know where I live, where Emma goes to school, what car I drive. Which means they're either trying to scare you off the case, or they're gathering intelligence for something more permanent. Marcus's voice was steady, professional, but Sarah could hear the underlying concern. Pack a bag for you and Emma. Don't go home after you drop her off somewhere safe. Don't follow predictable routines. And Sarah, yeah, keep Rex with you at all times. He's the best early warning system you've got, and based on what you've told me, he's already saved Emma's life once. Sarah reached down to scratch behind Rex's ears, feeling the solid warmth of muscle and bone beneath his graying fur. What about the investigation? The shell companies, the network? Leave that to me. I'm briefing my team in 2 hours, and by noon, we'll have federal resources allocated to track down every connection you found. Your job now isn't investigating. It's surviving long enough for us to shut this down. And if they come for Emma before you can stop them, Marcus's pause was telling, then you do what any mother would do. You protect your child by any means necessary, and you trust that Rex will give you the warning you need when the time comes. After ending the call, Sarah sat in her kitchen as the first pale light of dawn crept through the windows. Rex hadn't moved from his protective position, his amber eyes tracking every shadow, every sound that didn't belong to their peaceful home. In 6 hours, Emma would wake up expecting a normal Saturday morning. Instead, Sarah would be explaining why they had to leave, why she couldn't go to her friend's birthday party, why Rex was suddenly sleeping in her room every night. How do you tell a 6-year-old that monsters are real, that they dress up in bright costumes and attend children's festivals, that they take pictures of little girls and planned terrible things in the shadows. Sarah looked at the evidence bag one more time, then carefully sealed it in a larger authorities and let them unravel the network she'd discovered. But tonight, she was still just a mother whose child had been targeted by predators and whose aging German Shepherd partner had become the thin line between her family and something unspeakably evil. Rex lifted his head and looked directly at her, and in his amber eyes Sarah saw the same determination that had driven him through 8 years of active duty. He was too old for this kind of work, his joints stiff and his muzzle gray. But he was still her partner, and he wasn't done protecting the people he loved. The hunt had just begun, and Rex had already chosen his side. Sarah's dining room had been transformed into something that belonged in a federal task force headquarters rather than a suburban home. The antique oak table that usually held Emma's art projects and homework now groaned under the weight of manila folders, printed police reports, and laptop computers humming with database searches. But it was the wall that told the real story, a large map of the southeastern United States now covered with colored pins, each one representing a child who had vanished from what should have been the safest places on Earth. Red pins for confirmed disappearances, yellow for suspected cases still under investigation, blue for children who had been found, though Sarah was beginning to understand that found didn't always mean alive or unharmed. Rex lay at her feet, his graying muzzle resting on crossed paws, but his amber eyes never stopped moving. He'd been monitoring her stress levels for the past 6 hours, occasionally lifting his head to nuzzle her hand when the weight of what she was uncovering became too much to bear. Dogs understood grief in ways that humans sometimes forgot. They felt it in the tension of muscles, smelled it in the chemistry of sweat and tears, sensed it in the subtle changes of breathing and heartbeat that accompanied true horror. Melissa Patterson, age 7, disappeared from the Peach Festival in Macon, Georgia, June 15th. Sarah's voice was steady as she pushed another red pin into the map, but her hands trembled slightly. Last seen near the children's entertainment area. Sunshine Party Services was contracted for Mascot appearances. She drew a line of red thread connecting Macon to the growing web of correlations spreading across her wall. The pattern was becoming undeniable, a spider's web of tragedy that stretched across state lines and devastated families with surgical precision. Tommy Rodriguez, age 5, vanished from a church carnival in Huntsville, Alabama, July 3rd. Kids' Dream Events provided the entertainment. Another pin, another thread, another family whose world had shattered in the time it took a child to disappear. Advocating for them, the families who found themselves alone with their grief and desperate questions. Sarah had access to law enforcement networks that painted a picture far darker than anything reported in the media. She pulled up another file on her laptop, cross-referencing missing persons reports with event permits and entertainment company registrations. The correlation software she'd borrowed from the department's fraud division was designed to find financial patterns, but it worked equally well for tracking predators who used business structures to hide their hunting. Rebecca Martinez, age 6, disappeared from the Cotton Festival in Dothan, Alabama, July 20th. The pin went in, the thread connected, the pattern grew stronger. Happy Times Entertainment was scheduled for face painting and balloon animals. Rex lifted his head, sensing the change in her breathing, as the full scope of what she was mapping became clear. This wasn't random. This wasn't opportunistic predators taking advantage of chaotic public events. This was systematic, coordinated, planned with the precision of a military operation. The entertainment companies rotated through different names and shell corporations, but the operational pattern remained consistent. Book events 3 to 4 weeks in advance, allowing time for reconnaissance and target selection. Focus on smaller festivals and local celebrations where security was minimal and law enforcement presence was ceremonial rather than tactical. Choose events with large crowds and multiple exit points, ensuring chaos and confusion when a child went missing. Sarah stood back from the map, her professional detachment finally cracking as the human cost of what she was seeing hit her with full force. Each pin represented a family destroyed, parents who would never stop wondering what happened to their child, siblings who would grow up with empty spaces at every birthday and holiday. 18 confirmed disappearances in 5 states over 8 months, she whispered to Rex, who immediately rose and pressed against her legs in a gesture of comfort that transcended the normal boundaries between human and animal. 18 families who thought they were taking their kids to innocent community events. The laptop screen flickered as another database search completed, and Sarah felt her heart stop as new results populated the screen. Not 18 cases, 23. The pattern extended further back than she'd initially realized, stretching across more states, involving more shell companies than she'd previously identified. Someone had been perfecting this system for over a year, refining their methods, expanding their territory, building a network of false identities and criminal infrastructure that allowed them to move through communities like ghosts. They studied police response times, researched local law enforcement capabilities, mapped escape routes with the thoroughness of professional criminals. Softly, the sound pulling Sarah back from the edge of the despair that threatened to overwhelm her analytical focus. She reached down to scratch behind his ears, drawing comfort from his solid presence. He'd been the first to recognize the threat, the first to understand that something was fundamentally wrong with that blue bear mascot at the festival. How many other children might have disappeared if Rex hadn't acted? How many families had been spared this nightmare because an aging German shepherd had trusted his instincts over human assumptions about what was safe and normal? She turned back to the map, forcing herself to see it not as a monument to tragedy, but as evidence that could prevent future tragedies. Somewhere in this pattern of pins and threads was the key to understanding how these predators operated, where they might strike next, and how they could finally be stopped. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m., and Rex's head snapped toward the sound with instant alertness. Sarah checked the security monitor she'd installed the night before, then breathed a sigh of relief as she recognized the familiar figure standing on her porch. Marcus Rodriguez had arrived, and with him the full weight of federal law enforcement resources that might finally be enough to match the sophistication of the network she was uncovering. Marcus Rodriguez looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago when Sarah had last worked with him on a joint task force. Lean, weathered, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing and the economical movements of someone who'd learned to conserve energy for when it really mattered. He carried a single aluminum briefcase and wore the kind of unremarkable clothes that allowed federal agents to blend into any environment. Rex evaluated the newcomer with the thorough assessment of a veteran K-9 who'd learned to distinguish between allies and threats through years of high-stakes encounters. He rose from his position near Sarah's feet, approached Marcus with measured steps, and performed what Sarah privately called his professional greeting. a careful scent analysis followed by acceptance or rejection based on criteria that remained mysterious to humans but had never been wrong. After a moment, Rex's tail swayed once and he returned to Sarah's side. Marcus had been accepted into their pack. "Jesus, Sarah," Marcus said as he took in the wall map with its web of colored pins and connecting threads. "This is what you put together in 12 hours. 18 hours, she corrected, gesturing toward the coffee pot that had been running continuously since she'd started. "And it's worse than what I told you on the phone. 23 confirmed cases now, possibly more if I expand surveillance equipment." The briefcase of a federal agent who'd been hunting the same monsters she'd stumbled across. "Before we go any deeper," Marcus said, "I need to meet Emma, not just because she's what's at stake here, but because I need to understand what kind of target profile we're dealing with." Sarah led him upstairs, Rex trailing behind them like a silent guardian. Emma's room was a 6-year-old's paradise of stuffed animals, art supplies, and picture books. But Sarah saw it now, through the eyes of someone who understood predator psychology. A bright, articulate child from a law enforcement family, living in a small town where everyone felt safe, where children still played outside and walked to school alone. The perfect target for someone who wanted to send a message. Emma looked up from her coloring book. As they entered, her blonde hair catching the morning sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. She'd inherited Sarah's sharp intelligence, but wrapped it in the kind of infectious cheerfulness that made adults smile involuntarily. "Mommy, who's your friend?" she asked, setting down her crayon with the careful precision that characterized everything she did. "This is Marcus," Sarah said, kneeling beside the bed. "He's a police officer like me, and he's going to help make sure you stay safe." Marcus crouched down to Emma's eye level, a gesture that immediately marked him as someone experienced with children. "Hi, Emma. Your mom tells me you're very smart. Has she explained why Rex has been staying in your room at night?" Emma nodded solemnly. "She said there are some bad people who might want to hurt children, and Rex is protecting me. But Rex would never let anything happen to me anyway, because we're family." The simple confidence in her voice made Sarah's chest tighten with protective fury. Emma trusted completely in the adults around her to keep her safe, in Rex to guard her sleep, in the fundamental fairness of a world where good people protected children from monsters. Someone was planning to destroy that trust, to tear that innocence away from her, with the calculated cruelty of predators who understood exactly how to weaponize a parent's worst fears. Marcus spent 10 more minutes with Emma, asking gentle questions about her school, her friends, her activities, mapping the routine that someone had been photographing and documenting. When they returned downstairs, his expression was grim. "She fits the profile perfectly," he said without preamble. "Intelligent, articulate, photogenic. From a law enforcement family, which gives them psychological leverage against you. Lives in a small town where people don't expect professional-level criminal activity." Sarah felt sick. "You're saying they targeted her specifically?" "I'm saying, if they weren't targeting her specifically before, they are now." Marcus opened one of his folders and spread photos. "Same MO. Same kind of systematic intelligence gathering you experienced." The photos showed children at various events, festivals, carnivals, school functions. But what made Sarah's blood run cold was the clinical nature of the surveillance. These weren't casual snapshots taken by proud parents. These were the methodical documentation of hunting behavior, with children circled in red marker, their movements tracked across multiple images, their vulnerabilities assessed and catalogued. 12 states, 47 confirmed victims over the past 18 months. Marcus continued. They target law enforcement families when possible because it generates maximum media attention and psychological impact. But they'll take targets of opportunity if the operational security is good enough. Sarah studied the surveillance photos, her law enforcement training automatically analyzing composition, angles, equipment quality. Professional-grade cameras, telephoto lenses, multiple shooters based on the variety of angles. This isn't amateur hour. No, it's not. Marcus pulled out another folder. We think we're dealing with at least 3 teams operating in coordinated sweeps across the southeast. They rotate territories, share intelligence, and maintain operational security that rivals organized crime families. Rex had positioned himself so he could monitor both the front and back entrances while remaining close enough to provide comfort if Sarah's stress levels spiked. His presence was both reassuring and sobering, a reminder that even with federal resources, even with professional backup, their primary early warning system remained an 11-year-old dog whose instincts had already saved Emma's life once. "What's our next move?" Sarah asked. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We're going hunting." Marcus spread a new set of photographs across Sarah's dining room table with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that details mattered when hunting predators. These weren't the surveillance images of potential victims that had made Sarah sick to her stomach. These were law enforcement photos, grainy surveillance captures from festival security cameras, and cell phone footage submitted by witnesses, all focused on the same unremarkable figure who appeared at events across multiple states. "David Morrison," Marcus said, though he was careful not to identify the man by name yet. Mid-40s, average height, the kind of face you forget 5 minutes after seeing it. He's appeared in background footage at 12 different events where children subsequently disappeared. Sarah leaned forward, studying the images with the trained eye of someone who'd spent years learning to spot details others missed. The man was indeed utterly forgettable. Khaki pants, knew where to look. "He's always positioned near staff areas," she observed, tracing connections between images with her finger, never in the crowd, never participating in activities, always watching, always with clear sightlines to the children's entertainment zones, and always carrying the same equipment, Marcus added, pointing to subtle details across multiple photos. Small backpack, earpiece partially hidden by the cap, what looks like communication equipment. He's not just observing, he's coordinating. Rex had moved closer to the table, his nose twitching, as if he could somehow scent the evil radiating from the photographs. Sarah had seen him react to evidence before, but this was different. This was personal recognition, the kind of focused alertness he'd displayed when tracking specific suspects during his active duty years. "Rex knows him," she said with sudden certainty. "Not from these photos, but from somewhere else." Marcus looked skeptical until he saw Rex's behavior change as Sarah flipped through the surveillance images. The dog's hackles rose slightly, his ears flattened, and he began that low, controlled growling that meant he'd identified a direct threat to his pack. "Where would Rex have encountered Morrison?" Marcus asked, his tone sharpening with new interest. Sarah's mind raced back through years of cases, community events, police functions. Rex had attended dozens of public gatherings during his career, had been photographed with countless officials and dignitaries, had worked security for everything from political rallies to high school graduation ceremonies. "I don't know," she admitted, But Rex doesn't make mistakes about this kind of thing. If he recognizes Morrison, they've crossed paths before. Marcus gathered the photos into a neat stack, his expression thoughtful. That might explain why your family was specifically targeted. If Morrison knew Rex from previous encounters, he'd understand exactly what kind of threat an experienced canine represented to their operations. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're saying they came to our festival specifically because they knew Rex would be there. I'm saying they might have seen Rex as a challenge to overcome, rather than a deterrent to avoid. Marcus's voice was grim. These people are arrogant, Sarah. They've been successful for over a year, without being seriously challenged. The idea of neutralizing a legendary canine team might have been irresistible to them. Sarah looked down at Rex, who was still studying the photographs with the intensity of a professional reviewing case files. Her aging partner, who should have been enjoying peaceful retirement, had instead been thrust back into a hunt that could cost them everything. There's another event scheduled for this weekend, Marcus continued, pulling out a festival flyer. Halloween. Another attempt in this region. That's where they'll do it. Sarah studied the flyer, the same kind of family-friendly community event that had become a hunting ground for predators. Haunted houses and candy booths, costume contests and pumpkin carving. Hundreds of children gathered in one place with minimal security and maximum chaos. "We go," she said without hesitation. "Sarah, think about what you're saying. You'd be walking into a situation where armed, organized predators are expecting you, where Emma could be specifically targeted if they recognize you. Emma will be somewhere safe, with federal protection." Sarah's voice carried the kind of finality that ended arguments. "But Rex and I are going to that carnival, and we're going to end this." Marcus started to protest, then stopped as he saw the expression on Sarah's face. He'd worked with her before, knew the steel that lay beneath her professional demeanor. Once Sarah Chen decided something needed to be done, arguing with her was like arguing with a force of nature. "If we do this, we do it right," he said finally. "Full federal backup, tactical support, communications equipment, emergency extraction protocols. You don't improvise. You don't go off script. And you don't take unnecessary risks." Agreed. Sarah looked down at Rex, who had stopped growling but remained intensely focused on the surveillance photos. "But understand something, Marcus. Rex didn't just randomly attack that mascot at our festival. He recognized a specific threat, probably recognized Morrison himself. We're not just hunting these predators, we're finishing something Rex started." Marcus packed the photographs back into his briefcase, his movements sharp with purpose. "Then we better make sure we finish it right. Because if Morrison has been planning this confrontation as long as I think he has, he's not going to make the same mistakes twice." Sarah watched Rex settle back into his protective position near her feet, his amber eyes still alert, but calmer now that the threatening images had been removed from sight. Her aging partner had already saved Emma once, had disrupted whatever horror had been planned for that innocent community festival. Now it was time to see if they could end this nightmare permanently, before other families experienced the terror that had been stalking the shadows of their community for months. The hunt was about to become very personal, and Rex had already chosen his side. The whimpering began at 3:17 a.m., a sound Sarah had never heard from Rex in all their years together. She snapped awake, nerves primed by months of sleeping light since the threats against Emma began. This wasn't an outside noise or a false alarm. Enemies only he could see. "Easy, boy," Sarah whispered, dropping to her knees. "You're safe. We're all safe." Even as she said it, she knew it wasn't fully true. His subconscious was working through scenarios his waking mind couldn't voice, pulling on 11 years of experience to warn her. Something worse was coming. Her palm grazed his graying fur. His eyes flew open, blank for a heartbeat, then flooded with recognition. Rex lurched up to retake his guard position. The effort exposed the toll of constant vigilance. Age made his joints stiff. Stress made his movements heavier. He wasn't only tired. He was carrying the weight of protecting their family. "Dr. Hendricks needs to see him," Sarah murmured. In a dozen years together, through bomb threats, gang raids, disasters, Rex had never shown psychological strain. But he'd never been asked to guard against predators who targeted children, wearing innocence like camouflage. By morning, they were in Dr. Rachel Hendricks' exam room. She'd cared for Rex 8 years, checkups, stitches, even the surgery after a suspect's knife caught him in a drug bust. Now she listened to his elevated heart rate, felt the tension in his muscles, watched the watchfulness that never shut off. "It's psychological stress," she said gently. "Working dogs can develop what we recognize as PTSD. Nightmares, hypervigilance, protective positioning. It's trauma response." Sarah's throat tightened. "He's trying to protect Emma from something he senses. He thinks it's close." "Dogs assess threat differently," Dr. Hendricks said, scratching behind Rex's ear. The comfort barely took. "They don't separate present from near future the way we do. If he believes Emma is in imminent danger, his nervous system behaves like the attack could happen any second. What can we do?" "Remove the stressor," Hendricks said, frank and kind in equal measure. "Get Emma somewhere absolutely safe so Rex can stand down." But I'm guessing that isn't possible. That night, Sarah did what the manual wouldn't endorse. She moved Rex into her room, making a bed beside hers and angling it so he could keep Emma's doorway in view. "We're in this together, old man," she whispered, carding her fingers through his fur in the rhythm that had calmed him after hard cases. "Trust me to handle the parts you can't see." He answered with a small, plaintive sound that held 12 years of partnership and a promise he had never broken. He pressed his muzzle to her palm. She felt his absolute trust and the cost of it. Lying in the dark, Sarah understood. The nightmares weren't only trauma. They were tactical planning. His mind rehearsed angles, approaches, vulnerability. His body faced the hall. By dawn, Sarah was installing a third deadbolt while Emma cut her pancakes into neat squares, observing everything with a 6-year-old's relentless logic. "Why does Rex sleep in my room now?" she asked, not accusatory, just precise. "We talked about bad people who might want to hurt children," Sarah said, choosing steadiness over sugarcoating. "Rex's job is to make sure they can't get close to you." "You have a gun," Emma said matter-of-factly. "And you're a police officer. Why do you need Rex, too?" "Because some bad people are smart and sneaky," Sarah said, sliding the bolt home and joining her at the table. Rex took his post between them, eyes sweeping doorways. "They can fool adults. They can't fool dogs. Dogs smell and hear what we miss," Emma chewed, thinking. "Is that why Rex attacked the bear man at the festival? Because he smelled something bad?" The memory hit Sarah like a blow. She'd hoped the chaos blurred that day for Emma. It hadn't. "Yes," Sarah said simply. He knew before the grown-ups did. "Good," Emma said with the clarity of a child who still believed in clean lines between wrong and right. "I'm glad Rex bit him." "Emma," Sarah began reflexively. "Mom," Emma said, solemn and steady, "the bad people want to hurt kids like me. Rex stopped them. That's what good guys do." "You're right," Sarah said. "That's exactly what good guys do." The rest of the morning became an operation. New locks on windows, motion sensors in the yard, a security system fussy enough to impress Fort Knox. Emma shadowed the work like an apprentice, learning their new reality one sensor at a time. "Can I still go to school?" she asked while Sarah programmed the alarm. "We'll change a few things," Sarah said carefully. "Different pickup times, and Rex or I will always be with you. Think of it like bodyguards who love you and make excellent pancakes." Emma giggled, then laid a hand on Rex's head, as if sealing a pact. "Can he come to school sometimes?" "We'll see," Sarah said, already drafting the request in her head. A German shepherd in the hallways would send a message: "This child is protected. This family fights back. Try and you'll meet 11 years of trained fury." That afternoon, Emma's most piercing question arrived disguised as casual curiosity. "Mom, are you scared?" The easy answer rose by instinct, but Emma had met the upheaval with steadiness beyond her years. She deserved the truth. "Yes," Sarah said. "But not the kind of scared that makes you hide." "Go away," Sarah said, breathing in strawberry shampoo and everything childhood should be. "That's what families do." "Good," Emma mumbled, sliding toward sleep. In the doorway, Rex's eyes caught the faint light. 2 embers carrying the same promise Sarah had just made. Wednesday morning's briefing at the station was budget talk and overtime math, until Sarah's phone vibrated. She expected a school update. Instead, her stomach iced over. On the screen, a crisp photo of Emma's classroom schedule, with room numbers, teacher names, recess and lunch times. A marked walking route from main building to playground, annotations circling blind spots where an approach could go unseen. Beneath it, "Don't dig deeper. This is your final warning." Her hands shook. Around the table, the meeting droned on. Captain Williams glanced up. "Sarah, you look like you've seen a ghost." "I need to go," she said, already on her feet. "Family emergency." "Lieutenant," but she was moving. Weapon check by muscle memory and breath tight with urgency. Rex was in the cruiser. Emma was at school, surrounded by children and teachers who had no idea her war had found them. She called the office while navigating traffic. "This is Lieutenant Chen, County Police. I need Emma Chen removed from class immediately and secured in the principal's office. No one releases her to anyone but me. This is not a drill." 6 minutes stretched to an hour. In Principal Morrison's office, Emma swung her legs and colored a borrowed page, wholly herself and wholly unaware of how close danger had leaned. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked as Sarah scooped her in. "No, baby, you did everything right," Sarah said, relief surging so hard it hurt. "We're going on a little adventure today." The conversation with Captain Williams 30 minutes later was the hardest of Sarah's career. She took the same chair where she'd received commendations, promotions, and the kind of praise that made overtime feel like purpose. Emma was safe at Janet Morrison's house. Rex paced the hall like a caged storm. "You want indefinite leave to chase a federal case that may or may not connect to threats against your family," Williams said, bone-weary from decades of watching good cops bleed for personal reasons. They have my daughter's schedule, Captain. Photos taken inside her school. They mapped her route to the playground. Her voice didn't wobble, not even as anger burned clean through fright. This isn't about a case anymore. It's about keeping my child alive. You walk away. I may not be able to protect your position, he said. Civil service rules, unions, there are limits. If you go rogue, I understand. And if the task force can't deliver, if they escalate, you'll face them alone. Halloween Carnival. Surveillance teams, undercover agents, emergency response units. Everything we need to end this permanently. Agent Rodriguez, Williams said, recognizing the voice and the stakes. Can you guarantee her safety? No one can guarantee safety against an organized network that's been hunting children for a year, Marcus said. But this is our best chance to stop them, before another child is targeted. Silence settled. Finally, Williams nodded. Take your leave. Do what you have to do, but hear me. If this goes wrong, if Emma is hurt because you chose to fight, that's yours to carry forever. And if I run, and someone else's child is taken because I was scared, Sarah said. I couldn't live with that at all. That evening, Sarah's kitchen became a war room. Emma would stay with Janet Morrison under a federal security detail Marcus arranged through channels Sarah didn't ask about. Rex would remain with Sarah. Their partnership was the sharpest weapon they had against predators who thought a community festival was cover. We're really doing this, she told Rex. He lifted his head from the back door, eyes bright with comprehension. Saturday's Halloween Carnival would be the battleground. The place months of hunting and hiding would end with a clear line drawn. She had no illusions. There were no guarantees both of them would walk back out. But this time Emma was truly safe, and that mattered more than anything. Rex had saved her daughter once with instinct and courage. Now Sarah would help save other families' children with planning and resolve. The nightmares were about to meet the daylight. Some bonds were stronger than fear, and some promises were worth any price. The abandoned warehouse on the edge of town no longer looked abandoned. It breathed like a command center, monitors stacking the walls in shimmering grids, feeds rolling from traffic cams, cell towers, aerial drones. Radios hummed with encrypted back and forth from agents scattered across the county. Topographic maps and carnival layouts papered every surface, layered with grease-penciled patrol routes, choke points, and exfil corridors Marcus's team had spent 3 days stitching together. Sarah stood in the middle of that machine. The tactical vest under her festival volunteer windbreaker felt almost weightless compared to the responsibility sitting on her ribs. Micro-cameras were feathered into the jacket seams, skin-tone comms tucked behind each ear. A GPS chip in her boot heel would let the tactical team find her to within a yard anywhere inside the fairgrounds. Her service weapon rode snug at her side. She'd rehearsed the motion 1,000 times and could draw it in her sleep. Radio check, Marcus said into her ear, voice crisp over the bone conduction mic. All teams report, affirmatives stitched across the net. Surveillance at every gate and side path, undercover parents, strollers and cotton candy, med teams staged just off-site, SWAT elements dark posted by the perimeter. 12 federal agents, 4 local operators, 1 helo on a hot standby, all orbiting around a single K-9 team, stepping into what everyone admitted could be a well-baited snare. Rex sat at her heel, quiet as loaded steel. The grizzle at his muzzle didn't blunt the mind behind those amber eyes. She'd seen the same look before bomb sweeps and meth lab raids. His body older, his instincts honed to a razor's edge. Age had taught him to spend only what he needed and save the rest for when it truly mattered. He knows, Sarah murmured, scratching the notch behind his right ear in the ritual that preceded every bad night that turned out all right. 11 years, and he still knows when the air changes. Marcus closed a loop with the pilot and joined her. Pre-op calm, so practiced, it made his shoulders look carved. "Emma's secure," he said. "2 agents as neighbors for cover. A second team staged for emergency extraction. If anyone blinks in her direction, we'll know." The update did exactly what such updates always did, eased nothing, and reminded Sarah of the only stakes that mattered. Every mother instinct screamed to pull the plug, sweep up Emma, and vanish into a place where predators couldn't follow. 12 years in uniform had taught her the blunt math. Run, and they will take someone else's child while you hide. "What if Morrison doesn't show?" she asked, voicing the splinter that had kept her awake 2 nights running. "What if he smells the trap?" "Then we just hosted the most expensive public safety outreach in FBI history," Marcus said, mouth tilted toward a smile that never reached his eyes. "But his profile says he won't resist. You and Rex tore holes in his operation, dragged light over his network. From where he sits, tonight is payback and proof of control. He'll want to stand where he used to hunt and tell himself he still owns the ground." Sarah let the room flatten into a checklist. Weapon, mags, radio, medkit. Rex's vest looked ceremonial from 10 feet, but would stop a blade and buy seconds against a slug. His tracker pinged green. Marcus handed her a Carnival program that read like crafts and pie contests, and in the margins carried surveillance photos and abbreviated notes only they would see. "He'll watch for cop tells," Marcus said. "You're a mom with a retired K9 enjoying a community night. Not bait, not a badge." "Copy." She snapped Rex's leash. The familiar weight of it in her palm felt like a partnership condensed to a strip of woven nylon. "If this goes bad, if he clocks the setup, you keep Emma safe no matter what. Promise me."
"Partner?"
His tail made a single decisive sweep, the signal he'd given at the start of every hard job since their first. The Ashford County Halloween Carnival had turned the fairgrounds into a bright, eerie dream. Orange strings fluttered from tent poles, jack-o'-lanterns flickered on hay bales. The air smelled like caramel burn and fryer oil, riding the sharp edge of October. Laughter rattled out of the haunted house. Teenage vampires scrolled phones. Pirates cut pie with cheap plastic knives. Sarah and Rex flowed through the front gate at exactly 7 p.m., indistinguishable from 100 other families, except to the dozen professionals listening for her breath. To any passerby, she was a mother with her old police dog out to soak in the town's favorite night. To Rex, the world had shifted. The instant they cleared the turnstiles, he went from friendly to focused. His ears flicked through channels, building a map of sound. The long muscle of his back tensed and relaxed in tiny calibrations. His nose wrote the crowd into categories: sweat, fear, solvents, adrenaline, sugar, gun oil. "Alpha surveillance, we're in," Sarah murmured, words so soft she wouldn't have heard them without the vibrating whisper in her jaw. "Starting pattern." They worked the grounds like genuine tourists. She lost small bills at a ring toss, bought a caramel apple she wouldn't eat, watched Rex accept careful pets from tiny witches and astronauts with the gentleness that had made him a community favorite. Under the theater, the hunt ran. 20 minutes in, his gait changed, 1 degree tighter, head canted just so. "What do you have?" she breathed, trusting him and moving when he moved. They cleared the corner by the ring toss, and there he was. David Morrison stood 30 feet away, where any one casing would stand, abutting the long sight line to the children's costume contest. In every photo, he'd looked like nobody. In person, nobody felt like a wrong note in a familiar song. The skin prickled along Sarah's arms. Rex's hackles inched up and settled. He drifted half a step ahead of her, the placement that let him absorb the first lunge without blocking her weapon. No barking, no dramatic alerts, just a patient coil inside muscle, waiting for the exact second patience became danger. "Target acquired," Sarah said, pulse in her throat but voice flat. "Morrison near the costume stage, per prediction." He did what monsters do when they decide crowds make them invisible. Scanned faces, memorized groups, sorted the isolated from the protected with a practiced patience that made Sarah want to put a bullet through his kneecap. He didn't reach for a single child. He didn't need to. He was building a list in his head. Vinyl wrap. Terrible placement. The engine turned over with a low, covering purr. A thin vibration ran through the aluminum. Rex's nostrils fluttered fast, and something like restrained fury tightened his shoulders. Sarah moved with him, already hearing what he had. A muffled voice, high and confused, smothered by insulation and running noise. A whimper. "Marcus," she said, heat flooding her limbs. "Modified truck behind main stage. Rex is alerting. Possible victim inside." "Hold," Marcus snapped. "Tactical is moving." The whimper sharpened into a small sound of panic. Too fast, too loud, wrong for a child in any context. Protocol said wait. Rex's low growl said now. Some decisions you make with your badge. Some you make with your oath. "Moving," Sarah whispered, already closing distance. "Child in immediate distress. We can't wait." Rex slid his body into the channel between her and where Morrison had stood, an instinctive barrier that let him watch two fronts at once. The truck's rear doors were padlocked, basic hardware store steel that keeps honest people honest. She pulled compact bolt cutters, cut and caught the lock before it clanged to the asphalt. She swung the doors and tasted bile. In the dimmed interior, Lucas Martinez, 5, missing 3 days, sat crumpled in a corner. Duct tape wrapped his wrists. A child-size surgical mask rode tight against his mouth. Not medical, muzzling. His pupils were blown wide. His limbs moved like they belonged to someone else. "Hey, sweetheart," Sarah said softly, holstering before her hands touched him. "I'm a police officer. I'm taking you home." Hope flared in his eyes, like an instinct too stubborn to die. She stripped tape and mask, checked for restraints on ankles, fought down the rage climbing her throat. Outside, Rex's footfall shifted, claws making small remarks on the metal step. Perimeter set, eyes out. "Marcus," Sarah said, already gathering Lucas against her. "I have Lucas Martinez, alive, likely drugged. I need med—" The truck lurched as something slammed against its skin. Footsteps skidded along the side wall. Rex's growl climbed, precision and warning in the same chord. "Stay down," Sarah told Lucas, folding herself between him and the door. Her weapon cleared leather and leveled out. The man who filled the frame wasn't Morrison. Subordinate, twitchy, gaze unfixed. He gripped a tire iron like he wished it were courage. "Back away from the kid," he spat. "You don't know what you're crossing." "I know exactly what I'm crossing," Sarah said, chest steady, sights center mass. "Drop it, step back, and live to see a lawyer." He lunged, carving the Carnival dusk. "Med team to the catering truck," Marcus called across the net, control punching through urgency. "Recovered victim needs immediate attention." Paramedics loaded Lucas in a tide of competence. Airway, pupils, fluids. Festival security started pushing families toward exits with apologies shouted over loudspeakers. A SWAT operator took the truck keys and began the slow, disciplined dissection that turns chaos into evidence. Phones, invoices, route maps. The bones of a network were built right into its walls. Morrison was gone. He'd melted into the crowd during the violence at the truck, made maybe when Sarah broke cover, or spooked by the first siren. The net tightened, but nets take seconds to move, and predators learn the paths people never use. They had one child back, breathing, reachable. They did not have the man who made that truck necessary. "He got away," Sarah said, not to anyone, and to everyone. "But we have Lucas," Marcus answered, watching the ambulance doors close with a hollow thud. "And we have a rolling crime scene, communications, dosage logs, enough to open doors we haven't found yet." Rex sat, panting softly, an old, working dog's mix of satisfaction and vigilance written into his posture. He'd found the thing that mattered, held the perimeter, bought the seconds a child needed. He was past retirement, yes. He was also the difference between a rescue and a recovery. His eyes kept moving, across the thinning crowd, past the stage, toward the places a hunter would linger to see if the field still belonged to him. The battle had a bright spot and a long shadow. A family would get their boy back. A network would feel heat in places it had cooled. And somewhere in the lights and smoke, Morrison had learned something he would not be able to forget. Sarah Chen and her old German shepherd would burn their lives to keep strangers' children safe. Agents taped and photographed and catalogued. The helo searched for a signature that flickered and vanished into alleys a county fair doesn't map. Marcus handed Sarah a bottle of water she didn't remember opening. The festival lay half dismantled around them, strings sagging, paper ghosts rustling in a wind that smelled like sugar and something scorched. "We'll get him," Marcus said, promise and calculus braided together. "He won't stop. That's his flaw." "He thinks the ground belongs to him," Sarah said. "Tonight it didn't." Rex leaned into her thigh. One clean weight, his way of taking stock and settling her. She scratched the notch behind his ear like she always did when they were both still standing after a night that tried to take them down. For Lucas, the nightmare had a door and a way out. For the rest, there would be more doors. Some rescues are endings. Some are declarations. Tonight said, "We see you." Name that would not stay gone. Sarah watched the ambulance lights vanish at the edge of town and let herself breathe once, deep and shaking, before she locked everything back into place. "Ready to go again when it comes," she whispered to Rex. He flicked an ear like he always did at the end of a long shift, as if to say, "When it comes, we go." The war wasn't over. It had finally fully begun. The pediatric wing of County General hummed with controlled urgency. Sarah stood outside the observation window, watching as doctors and nurses examined 5-year-old Lucas Martinez, a boy who'd spent 3 days in the hands of predators. Lucas sat on the table, legs dangling, while a pediatric psychiatrist coaxed him with gentle questions. No visible injuries, Sarah noted. Whoever took him had been careful. Rex lay beside her chair, graying muzzle on his paws, amber eyes fixed on the boy. Sarah suspected it was because Rex knew, deep down, this could have been Emma. "Mrs. Chen?" Dr. Patricia Valdez stepped out, her voice low. "Lucas keeps asking for the police dog who found him. Could Rex visit?" Sarah looked down. Rex's ears lifted. "He's not certified as therapy, but he's good with kids. I think it'll help them both." The moment Rex entered, Lucas's rigid posture eased. He reached out, fingers trembling, and whispered, "He knew I was scared." Rex settled beside him, patient and alert, letting the boy's hand rest in his fur. Minutes later, Lucas's parents arrived, exhausted from the overnight drive. Maria Martinez collapsed into her husband's arms at the sight of her son. Carlos turned to Sarah, eyes wet. "Thank you for bringing him home." "This could have been Emma," Sarah whispered to Rex. He nudged her hand, understanding. Before they left, news crews swarmed the hospital entrance. Lieutenant Chen, how did Rex spot the threat? Dogs don't lie, Sarah said. He sensed what we couldn't and acted to protect children. That's what good partners do. That night, Sarah reviewed Lucas's interview notes. The boy had described multiple adults, planned destinations, a network, not Morrison's first kidnapping. Rex lifted his head, sensing her unease. The phone rang at 11 p.m. Marcus's voice was grim. Our suspect's talking. You'll want to hear this. In the federal building's interrogation room, Marcus questioned James Fletcher, a career criminal staring at life in prison. Cooperation was his only currency. Who gave the orders? Marcus asked. David Morrison, Fletcher said. Used to be a social worker, knew which kids were vulnerable, which families had money, had connections, cops, courts, child services. The name hit Sarah like a blow. Morrison had worked alongside her for years. He'd been at Emma's school events, in her kitchen near Rex. How'd he stay invisible? Marcus pressed. Inside info on police moves. But he made a mistake with that Chen lady and her dog. A text from Marcus lit Sarah's phone. Need you in interview room 2, now. Outside the room, Marcus handed her a manila folder. Inside, photos of Emma spanning months, notes on Sarah's schedule, assessments of Rex's skills, reports mapping their vulnerabilities with surgical precision. Emma was always the target, Marcus said. 6 months of planning. The festival wasn't chance. It was the end game. Rex growled low at the mention of Morrison's name. Sarah understood now. The nightmares, the constant guarding, the attack on the Mascot. He'd recognized Morrison's scent, tried to warn her. In the task force's secure conference room, FBI profiler Patricia Wong addressed the team. Behind her, the wall was plastered with Morrison's surveillance of Emma. It doesn't take law enforcement kids for money alone, Wong said. It's about power, proving he can beat the system. Emma's smart, from a police family, and the daughter of the canine team that wrecked his operation. She's a trophy. Marcus asked, Where is he now? Unknown, Wong replied. We've frozen his assets and alerted international agencies, but he's had months to prepare. Disrupting him may make him desperate. Sarah's phone buzzed again. Janet Morrison, her neighbor watching Emma. Someone called, asking about her school schedule. Claimed they were from the district. Felt wrong. He's moving, Sarah said. Emma's protected, Marcus assured. Federal agents, safe house? No. He knows our playbook. He helped write it. Before Marcus could answer, Wong looked up from her screen. He just emailed you. Sarah opened it. The words chilled her blood. Your daughter is beautiful when she sleeps. Tonight, we finish what your dog started at the festival. Rex's growl deepened, vibrating through the floor. Sarah scanned the faces in the room, agents, officers, people she trusted. Set the trap, she said. We use me and Emma as bait. This ends tonight. The pediatric wing of County General pulsed with quiet urgency. Sarah stood at the observation window, watching doctors and nurses examine 5-year-old Lucas Martinez, a boy who had spent 3 days in the hands of predators. Lucas sat on the exam table, legs dangling, while a pediatric psychiatrist coaxed him with gentle questions. No bruises or cuts, Sarah noted. Whoever had taken him had been careful, too careful. Beside her, Rex lay with his graying muzzle resting on crossed paws, amber eyes locked on the boy. The old German shepherd seemed to know, instinctively, that this could just as... But he's good with kids. I think it'll help them both. When Rex padded into the room, Lucas's rigid posture softened. The boy reached out with trembling fingers and whispered, "He knew I was scared." Rex settled beside him, letting the small hand rest in his fur, still as stone, eyes gentle but alert. Moments later, Lucas's parents arrived, faces drawn from an overnight drive. Maria Martinez crumpled into her husband's arms at the sight of her son. Carlos turned to Sarah, eyes wet. "Thank you for bringing him home." "This could have been Emma," Sarah murmured to Rex. The dog nudged her hand in silent understanding. Before they could leave, news crews swarmed the entrance. "Lieutenant Chen, how did Rex spot the threat?" "Dogs don't lie," Sarah told the cameras. "He sensed what we couldn't and acted to protect children. That's what good partners do." That night, Sarah reviewed Lucas's interview notes. The boy had described multiple adults, planned routes, and a next stop in another city. Not Morrison's first kidnapping, just the latest in a network. Rex, lying at her feet, lifted his head, sensing her unease. At 11 p.m., the phone rang. Marcus's voice was grim. "Our suspect's talking. You'll want to hear this." In the federal building's interrogation room, Marcus questioned James Fletcher, a career criminal with one card left to play: cooperation. "Who gave the orders?" Marcus asked. "David Morrison," Fletcher said. "Used to be a social worker, knew which kids were vulnerable, which families had money, had connections, cops, courts, child services." The name hit Sarah like a punch. Morrison had been at her kitchen table, at Emma's school plays, standing beside Rex. "How'd he stay invisible?" Marcus pressed. "Never hit the same place twice. Used fake companies, knew police moves before you did. But he screwed up with that Chen lady and her dog." Outside the room, Marcus handed Sarah a manila folder. Inside, photos of Emma taken over months, notes on Sarah's work schedule, assessments of Rex's skills, vulnerabilities mapped with surgical precision. "Emma was always the target," Marcus said. 6 months of planning. The festival wasn't random, it was the end game. At the mention of Morrison, Rex growled low, a sound that seemed to come from the floor. Sarah's mind replayed the warning signs, his restless nights, his attack on the festival mascot, now clear. He had recognized Morrison's scent long before she had. In the task force's secure conference room, FBI profiler Patricia Wong addressed the team. The wall behind her was covered with Morrison's surveillance of Emma. He asked, "Where is he now?" "Unknown," Wong said. "Assets frozen, alerts sent to every major agency. But he's had months to prepare. Disrupting him could make him desperate." Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from Janet Morrison, her neighbor watching Emma. Someone called asking about her school schedule, claimed they were from the district, felt wrong. "He's moving," Sarah said. "Emma's protected," Marcus assured her. "Federal agents, safe house." "No, he knows our playbook. He helped write it." Before Marcus could respond, Wong's computer pinged. "He just emailed you." Sarah opened it. "Your daughter is beautiful when she sleeps. Tonight, we finish what your dog started at the festival." Rex's growl deepened, vibrating through the soles of her boots. Sarah scanned the faces around the table, agents she trusted with her life. "Set the trap," she said. "We use me and Emma as bait. This ends tonight." The abandoned hunting cabin had been transformed into a tactical operations center, its camping gear concealing encrypted radios, its surrounding woods hiding federal agents, SWAT teams, and state police. From the single window, Sarah watched Marcus coordinate what was easily the most unconventional and risky operation of his career. "This is insane," Marcus muttered for the fourth time. "Using a 6-year-old as bait violates every federal regulation. Morrison won't come after Emma if he thinks she's protected," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the maternal terror in her chest. "He's breached every form of official security. The only way to get him close is to make him think his chance has come." Rex, her aging German Shepherd partner, lay across Emma's legs on the bed, his eyes fixed on the door. He knew they were using his pack as bait, and his whole body radiated controlled readiness. Emma colored quietly in a book, finding normalcy where an adult would feel nothing but dread. "Surveillance reports no movement on perimeter roads," Agent Wong's voice crackled over the radio. "Last sighting of Morrison was 12 miles east, 4 hours ago." Sarah checked her Glock again, comforted only by its familiar weight. Morrison's desperation had made him unpredictable. Their psychological profiles could be wrong. "Mom?" Emma asked suddenly. "Is Mr. Morrison really coming here?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said, kneeling beside her. Rex shifted to include Sarah in his protective circle. "But he doesn't know about the officers waiting for him." Would decide. The forest went silent. Sarah positioned herself by the front window, Rex beside Emma, his muscles coiled. Morrison emerged from the trees, calling in a voice that once belonged to a trusted colleague. "I know you're in there, Sarah. I just want what I came for. Give me Emma, and no one gets hurt." Sarah stepped into the doorway, weapon trained. "The only thing you're getting is a prison cell, David. It's over." Morrison laughed bitterly. "Prison doesn't scare me. I know things, enough to save dozens of kids. I'll cooperate, after I finish what I started. Emma proves your system can't stop me." Emma stepped forward, her small hand on Rex's collar. "I'm not going with you. Rex won't let you take me. My mom won't let you hurt anyone." Her defiance caught him off guard. "Emma, there are other children. You're lying. Bad people always lie to kids." Rex shifted forward. Morrison's hand went for something under his jacket. "Rex," Sarah commanded, "protect Emma." The shepherd launched, slamming Morrison to the ground, teeth locking on his weapon arm. A syringe, meant for Emma, flew into the trees. Agents swarmed in, tactical lights flaring. Morrison was restrained, screaming in pain. Emma stood calm in the doorway, watching the man who'd hunted her for months, taken away. "Is it over?" she asked. "It's over, baby," Sarah said, pulling her close. "He can't hurt anyone again." Rex sat beside them, tail swaying once, the signal of a completed mission. In Nashville's federal facility, agents processed evidence that would dismantle the most sophisticated child trafficking network in the Southeast. Morrison, his arm in a cast courtesy of Rex, was talking. Names, locations, finances, enough to trigger simultaneous raids across 7 states. 14 children recovered so far, Marcus reported. Ages 5 to 12, physically unharmed. Sarah watched from behind one-way glass as Agent Wong drew more from Morrison. His arrogance had cracked. Now he'd spend life without parole. Rex lay beside her chair, still alert despite exhaustion. Down the hall, Emma was with child interview specialists. Her testimony would seal the case. The call that mattered most came from Maria Martinez, whose son had been rescued. "Rex saved my boy. You brought him home. I don't know how to thank you." Emma emerged from her interview and knelt beside Rex. "The lady said Rex is a hero. She said he saved lots of kids, not just me." Sarah hugged her daughter, Rex leaning into them with the quiet pride of a soldier. Victories are measured in arrests and convictions. The most important are measured in children who get to grow up safe. Justice had been served. The Guardian's watch could finally stand down. The federal courthouse in Nashville had never seen anything like the Morrison trial. A tangled case of organized child trafficking spanning 7 states, brought down by an unlikely partnership between a determined police captain and her aging German shepherd. Sarah Chen sat in the witness box, one hand on the Bible, the other resting near Rex, whose graying muzzle lay across crossed paws. His amber eyes stayed sharp, despite the toll months of vigilance had taken. Federal judges had made rare accommodations to allow Rex beside her during testimony, recognizing that his instincts had been as critical to the investigation as any detective's skill. The prosecutor began. "Officer Chen, please tell the court how Rex first identified David Morrison as a threat." Sarah recounted the autumn festival, Rex lunging at the costumed mascot, the hidden compartment in the suit, and the chain of discoveries revealing a sophisticated network of predators. Her voice stayed steady, even as she described how close Morrison had come to stealing her daughter Emma. In the packed gallery sat reporters, law enforcement observers, and families of recovered children. When asked how Morrison had targeted Emma, Sarah's gaze locked on the defendant. "He used his position to study our routines and find our vulnerabilities. He knew exactly where to strike." Beside her, Rex's muscles tensed as Morrison's scent drifted across the courtroom. He didn't growl, but his readiness was clear, the same instinct that had saved Emma. The victim statements that followed were gut-wrenching. Maria Martinez described the endless 3 days when her son, Lucas, was missing. Others spoke of stalled investigations, desperate nights, and the overwhelming relief of the raids that freed their children. "Rex saved my daughter," said Janet Morrison, whose 8-year-old was recovered from a Kentucky safe house. Not just her body, her belief in good people. 3 weeks later, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. Morrison was sentenced to life without parole. His network was dismantled. Children were safe again. That same day, Sarah was promoted to captain, tasked with creating a specialized canine unit for crimes against children. As she and Rex left the courthouse for the last time, his pace was slow, measured. His verdicts, the rest lived in the quiet safety of children who would never meet the monsters who once hunted them. Months later, the conference room at County General Hospital buzzed with energy. Around the table sat parents whose children had been recovered in the raids. Maria Martinez slid forward a thick folder, legal documents for the Rex Foundation, a non-profit to train retired canines for child protection work. "Rex saved Lucas," Maria said simply. Now he can save others by teaching people to see what dogs see. At Sarah's feet, Rex rested on a blanket Emma had brought, his eyes alert whenever talk turned to protecting children. "The mission is prevention," Sarah told the group. "Dogs like Rex can spot danger long before we do. We'll train them to work in schools, community centers, anywhere a child might be at risk." Requests for programs were already coming in. Schools wanted safety talks. Federal agencies offered support to train dogs in detecting chemical traces tied to trafficking. Janet Morrison, now the volunteer coordinator, explained, "We'll teach kids that if an animal reacts badly to someone, it might be a warning." Emma became the Foundation's unofficial ambassador, recording safety messages for elementary schools. "If your dog or cat acts scared or angry around someone, tell a grown-up you trust." Donations poured in, enough for training facilities, veterinary care, and educational outreach. Rex's story had touched families across the country. His final field appearance came at a state police academy demonstration, showcasing how a retired dog could detect trafficking-related residues. He moved slower now, but his precision never faltered. Dr. Hendricks, watching closely, murmured to Sarah, "He's running on determination. It can't last much longer." After the applause, Sarah knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. His tail gave one slow wag, the same sign he'd always given when a job was done right. The Foundation would continue long after Rex was gone, his name carried by dogs trained to trust their instincts, and by humans taught to listen. Spring turned to late autumn. The county courthouse plaza filled with red, white, and blue bunting, folding chairs, and crowds that spilled into surrounding streets. It was a joint ceremony, Sarah's promotion to captain, the launch of the Regional Crimes Against Children Task Force, and the official recognition of Rex's service. On stage, Rex sat beside Sarah, dignified despite his frailty. Dr. Hendricks remained close with emergency equipment, just in case. Governor Patricia Williams took the podium. Lieutenant Sarah Chen and Canine Officer Rex represent the triumph of instinct and retired canines for child safety. This is only the beginning. Families of rescued children filled the audience. Some of the kids took the microphone themselves. Lucas Martinez, now 8, spoke firmly.
"Rex found me when I was scared and alone. He is the best police dog ever, and I'm going to be a police officer like him."
Each child's words drew tears, proof that this wasn't just about law enforcement, but about lives rebuilt. Then came the moment no one would forget, Rex receiving a specially commissioned medal, the first in state history for a canine's child protection service. Sarah knelt to place it around his neck as the crowd rose in a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Dr. Hendricks approached quietly afterward.
"He's tired, Sarah. Today took everything he had."
Sarah looked at Rex, the satisfaction in his eyes, the peace of a final mission complete. Emma stepped onto the stage, kneeling beside him. She wrapped her arms gently around his neck.
"Thank you for keeping me safe,"
she whispered.
"You're the best friend I'll ever have."
Rex nuzzled her cheek. Sarah saw in that small gesture the essence of his life's work, loyalty without question, protection without pause. The ceremony ended, but Rex's legacy lived on, in the Foundation's work, in the children he'd saved, and in the knowledge that some heroes leave more than medals behind. They leave a safer world. The threat came from a direction Sarah had never anticipated, not from Morrison's network, which had been dismantled completely, but from someone who'd been inspired by the media coverage of the trafficking operation to attempt his own version of predatory hunting.
Thomas Briggs, a drifter with a history of mental illness and petty crime, had spent months studying newspaper accounts of Morrison's methods, convinced that he could succeed where Morrison had failed. Sarah first learned of Briggs' existence through a routine intelligence bulletin that crossed her desk on a Tuesday morning in February, 6 months after Morrison's sentencing. The FBI had identified communications suggesting that someone was planning to target law enforcement families, specifically focusing on children whose parents had gained national recognition for investigating crimes against minors.
Briggs has been researching your family for weeks.
Agent Wong reported during a conference call that connected Sarah with federal task forces across 3 states.
Social media posts, public records, local news coverage. He's obsessed with proving that Morrison's failure was due to poor execution rather than flawed strategy.
Rex had been declining steadily since the recognition ceremony. His once powerful frame, now fragile with age and the accumulated stress of months spent in protective mode. Dr. Hendricks had recommended reducing his activity to gentle walks and supervised rest, but the German Shepherd's instincts remained as sharp as ever, his amber
eyes still tracking threats that human senses couldn't perceive. He won't be able to handle another high-stress situation, Dr. Hendricks warned Sarah during a routine veterinary visit. His heart is operating on borrowed time. His joints are arthritic, and his body simply can't sustain the kind of protective vigilance that characterized his response to Morrison's threat. But Rex hadn't received the message that his protective duties were finished. The attack came during routine school pickup on a Thursday afternoon that felt no different from hundreds of other ordinary days. Sarah was running 15 minutes late due to a meeting that had stretched beyond its scheduled time, leaving Emma to wait with other children in the supervised area outside Riverside Elementary, where parents routinely collected their kids without concern for safety. Briggs approached Emma with the same kind of false authority that Morrison had used, identifying himself as a family friend, sent to collect her due to an emergency involving her mother. But where Morrison had been subtle and psychologically sophisticated, Briggs was crude and desperate, his approach immediately triggering alarm responses in both Emma and the other children nearby. "I don't know you," Emma said, with the clear confidence of someone who'd been taught to trust her instincts and question unfamiliar adults who claimed authority they hadn't earned. "My mom always picks me up herself, or she sends someone I know." Rex had been waiting in Sarah's patrol car, which was parked in the school lot, with windows cracked for ventilation. The aging German Shepherd detected the confrontation before any human realized that Emma was in danger. His nose processing scents, and his ears catching voice tones that indicated a direct threat to his pack member. What happened next would be described in police reports as heroic intervention by retired K-9 officer. But Sarah, arriving just in time to witness Rex's final act of protection, understood it as something far more profound. The German Shepherd summoned reserves of strength and speed that his failing body should no longer have possessed. Launching himself from the patrol car through the partially open window with the explosive power that had characterized his prime years, Rex covered 30 yards of school parking lot in seconds, his trajectory perfectly calculated to intercept Briggs's attempt to grab Emma's arm. The collision knocked Briggs backward into a parked minivan with enough force to crack the vehicle's windshield. But Rex didn't stop there. The aging dog's jaws locked onto Briggs's wrist, with the precision of someone who'd practiced this exact maneuver hundreds of times during training. preventing him from completing whatever he'd planned for Emma, while maintaining just an injured wrist, while trying to break free from a grip that felt like steel cables. But Rex didn't respond to the command immediately, as he always had during their active partnership. Instead, the German Shepherd maintained his protective positioning until Sarah had secured Briggs with handcuffs and confirmed that Emma was completely safe from further threat. Only then did Rex release his grip and step back, his amber eyes meeting Sarah's with the satisfied expression of someone who'd completed one final mission successfully. His tail swayed once in acknowledgement, the same subtle signal he'd given at the end of every successful operation during their 8 years of partnership. Then Rex collapsed. The veterinary emergency that followed was a blur of rushed transport, emergency procedures, and medical interventions that couldn't reverse the damage that Rex's final surge of protective energy had inflicted on his aging heart. Dr. Hendricks worked with desperate professionalism, but her eyes carried the message that Sarah already understood. Rex had given everything he had left to save Emma one last time, and his body couldn't recover from the effort. Emma sat in the veterinary hospital's waiting room, her small hands clutched around a stuffed animal, while she processed what had happened with the remarkable clarity that sometimes characterized children facing adult realities. She understood that Rex had saved her life, understood that his heroic intervention had come at a terrible cost, and understood that saying goodbye was now inevitable. "He protected me," she said quietly to Sarah as they waited for news that both of them already knew would be devastating. "Rex kept his promise to keep me safe, didn't he?" Sarah gathered Emma into her arms, breathing in the scent of her daughter's hair, while understanding that Rex's final act of protection had been both triumph and farewell. Victory and sacrifice that transcended normal boundaries between human and animal partnerships. Some missions required everything you had to give, and some promises were worth any price. Rex had kept his promise to protect Emma, and now it was time to say goodbye to the partner whose loyalty had never wavered, whose instincts had never failed, and whose love had saved their family in ways that no medal or recognition could adequately honor. Dr. Hendricks emerged from the emergency treatment room with the expression that veterinarians wore when medical expertise reached its limits and compassion became the only service they could provide. Her scrubs were stained with evidence of heroic efforts to save a patient whose body had simply given everything it had to offer, and her eyes carried the professional grief that came from losing animals who'd spent their lives serving others. Rex's heart gave out during his intervention with Briggs, she explained gently, her hands still trembling slightly from emergency procedures that had ultimately proven futile. The stress of that final protective action, combined with his age and the accumulated toll of months spent in hypervigilant mode, was more than his cardiovascular system could handle. Sarah felt the world shift around her as the words registered, understanding that she was receiving the news that every canine handler dreaded but ultimately expected. Rex had been living on borrowed time for months, his aging body sustained by loyalty and determination that transcended normal physical limitations. His final act of protection had been both gift and goodbye, salvation for Emma and sacrifice for himself. "Is he?" Sarah's voice failed her, unable to complete a question whose answer she already knew, but couldn't bear to hear spoken aloud. "He's unconscious, but not in pain," Dr. Hendricks said. her professional training allowing her to provide information while offering what comfort was possible. His breathing is shallow, his pulse is irregular, and his body is shutting down systematically. I can keep him comfortable, but I can't reverse the damage his heart sustained during the protective intervention. Emma looked up from her stuffed animal with the serious expression that had become characteristic of her approach to adult realities that exceeded normal childhood understanding. "Can we see him?" she asked quietly. "Can we tell him, 'Thank you for saving me'?" Dr. Hendricks nodded, leading them into the treatment room where Rex lay on a padded examination table. Surrounded by medical equipment that monitored vital signs, growing steadily weaker. The German shepherd's breathing was labored, but peaceful. His amber eyes closed in what looked more like rest than unconsciousness. Sarah knelt beside the table, her hands gentle on Rex's graying fur, as she struggled to find words adequate for saying goodbye to someone who'd been partner, protector, and family member for over a decade. Emma climbed onto a chair that positioned her at Rex's eye level, her small hands stroking his muzzle with the tender care she'd always shown him. "Rex," Emma whispered, her voice carrying across the quiet treatment room with the clear tone of someone who trusted that love could transcend the barriers between consciousness and unconsciousness. "It's Emma. I wanted to tell you that you're the best dog ever, and you kept your promise to protect me." Rex's eyes opened slightly, focusing on Emma with the kind of recognition that suggested he was still present despite his failing body. His tail moved almost imperceptibly, the same subtle acknowledgement he'd given throughout their partnership when completing successful missions. "Thank you, old friend," Sarah murmured, her voice thick with emotions. Partnership, of shared dangers and mutual protection, of a bond that had transcended normal relationships between humans and animals. His breathing slowed further, but his expression remained peaceful, satisfied, complete. Dr. Hendricks approached with the syringe that would end Rex's suffering gently, her movements careful and respectful, in recognition that they were saying goodbye to someone whose service had saved countless lives and protected families across multiple states. "He's ready," she said softly, understanding that some decisions transcended medical considerations and became acts of love that honored the dignity of heroes whose time had come. Sarah nodded, her hand resting protectively on Rex's head as Dr. Hendricks administered the medication that would carry him peacefully into whatever came after a lifetime of service and protection. Emma continued stroking his muzzle, her young voice whispering words of love and gratitude that filled the treatment room with the kind of tenderness that honored warriors who'd given everything for the people they loved. Rex's breathing became slower, more peaceful, until finally it stopped altogether. His amber eyes closed one final time, and Sarah felt the absence of his presence like a physical blow that left her gasping for air that suddenly seemed insufficient for sustaining life without her partner. "He's gone," Dr. Hendricks said quietly, but Sarah already knew. The bond that had connected them through 8 years of active partnership and months of protective vigilance had been severed, leaving behind a silence that felt like the end of the world. Emma continued stroking Rex's muzzle even after his breathing stopped, her 7-year-old understanding of death more practical than Sarah's adult struggle to accept that someone so essential to their family's safety could simply no longer exist. "He's not hurt anymore," Emma said with the clarity that sometimes characterized children's approach to loss and grief. "Rex finished all his jobs, and now he can rest." Sarah gathered Emma into her arms, holding her daughter while they both said goodbye to the German shepherd, whose instincts had saved Emma's life multiple times, whose loyalty had never wavered despite advancing age and declining health, whose final act of protection had ensured that their family would remain safe from predators who hunted in the shadows of community trust. The phone calls began within an hour, condolences from law enforcement colleagues, media requests for statements about Rex's death, and messages from families whose children had been protected by his instincts and courage. But Sarah ignored them all, focusing instead on the process of planning a memorial service worthy of someone whose service had transcended normal boundaries between human and animal partnerships. Some goodbyes required time that couldn't be measured in hours or days, and some grief demanded recognition that honored sacrifices too profound for simple condolences. Rex had earned a farewell that matched his service, and Sarah was determined to ensure that his final rest reflected the dignity of someone who'd spent his life protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The memorial service drew crowds that exceeded anything the county had ever seen for a fallen officer, with law enforcement vehicles stretching for miles along the country roads, leading to the cemetery where Rex would be laid to rest beside other heroes whose service had transcended normal expectations. Sarah stood near the gravesite that had been prepared with military precision, watching hundreds of people gather to honor a German shepherd whose instincts had saved more lives than most human officers achieved in entire careers. The honor guard was unlike anything previously organized for a canine memorial. 24 active and retired police dogs with their handlers, representing departments from across the southeastern United States, all standing at attention as Rex's flag-draped casket was carried to the grave site that overlooked the valley, where he'd spent his retirement years protecting Emma and hunting predators who threatened innocent families. Emma stood between Sarah and Maria Martinez, her small hands clutching the canine badge that had been specially crafted for this ceremony, a bronze replica of Rex's service badge that she would place on his grave as the final act of a farewell that honored both his professional service and personal sacrifice. At 7 years old, she possessed an understanding of loss and heroism that exceeded most adults' comprehension of what Rex had accomplished during his lifetime of protection. Governor Williams delivered the primary eulogy, her words carrying across the assembled crowd through a sound system that ensured every person in attendance could hear the tribute to someone whose service had inspired legislative changes, program expansions, and national conversations about the importance of listening to animal instincts when human judgment proved insufficient. Rex represents the best of what partnership between humans and animals can achieve, the governor said, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of honoring someone whose death had touched people across multiple states. His instincts saved Emma Chen's life multiple times, but his legacy extends far beyond any single family. The Rex Foundation has already trained 38 retired canines for specialized child protection work, and programs inspired by his service are being implemented in schools and communities from coast to coast. The testimonials from families whose children had been recovered during Morrison's network dismantling were devastating in their emotional impact. Parents spoke of nightmares that had been ended by Rex's detection abilities, of children who'd been returned from situations too horrible to describe in detail, of the overwhelming gratitude they felt toward a dog whose partnership with his promise.
His handler had revolutionized how law enforcement approached crimes against children. "My daughter is alive today because Rex recognized threats that human beings couldn't perceive," testified Janet Morrison, whose 8-year-old had been recovered from a trafficking location in rural Kentucky. "He didn't just save her life, he restored our faith that good still exists in a world that sometimes feels overwhelmed by evil." Sarah's promotion to chief of the newly established Regional Crimes Against Children Task Force was announced during the memorial service, along with federal funding that would expand Rex Foundation programs into 12 additional states. Her unconventional investigative methods had been validated at the highest levels of law enforcement, and her partnership with Rex had become the model for innovation that transcended traditional boundaries between different agencies and jurisdictions. But the most powerful moment of the memorial service came when Emma approached Rex's grave with the bronze K9 badge that represented his service and sacrifice. The assembled crowd fell silent as she knelt beside the flag-draped casket, her young voice carrying words that had been carefully prepared but delivered with the spontaneous emotion that characterized childhood's approach to loss and promise. "Rex, you were the best police dog ever, and you kept your promise to protect me from the bad people who wanted to hurt kids," Emma said, her voice clear and steady despite the tears that streamed down her cheeks. "I promise to become a police officer like my mom so I can protect other children the way you protected me. I promise to remember everything you taught me about being brave and staying safe and trusting the people who love you." She placed the bronze badge on Rex's casket with the ceremonial precision of someone who understood that some promises transcended normal childhood commitments and became lifetime dedications to service and protection. The crowd remained silent for several minutes after Emma returned to Sarah's side, the weight of her promise settling over the memorial service like a benediction that honored both Rex's sacrifice and the continuation of his mission through future generations who would carry forward his legacy of protection and service. Marcus Rodriguez, now promoted to Assistant Director of the FBI's Crimes Against Children Unit, delivered the final words of the memorial service. "Rex changed how we think about canine partnerships, about animal instincts, and about the importance of listening when our four-legged colleagues try to warn us about dangers we haven't recognized. His legacy will protect children for decades to come, and his memory will inspire law enforcement officers who understand that some partnerships transcend normal professional boundaries." As the ceremony concluded and the crowds began dispersing, Sarah remained at Rex's grave with Emma, both of them understanding that this farewell represented both ending and beginning. Rex's watch had ended, but his influence would continue through the foundation that bore his name, the programs he'd inspired, and the family whose love had sustained him through the most important mission of his career. Emma knelt once more beside the grave, her small hands gentle on the bronze badge that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. "I love you, Rex," she whispered. "I'll never forget how you saved me, and I'll never stop trying to save other kids the way you saved me." Sarah placed her hand on Emma's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of her daughter's presence, while understanding that Rex's greatest victory wasn't measured in criminals captured or networks dismantled, but in the continuation of love and protection through future generations who would carry forward his mission of safeguarding the innocent. The memorial service was ending, but Rex's legacy was just beginning. Somewhere across the country, retired K9s were being trained to detect threats that human senses couldn't perceive. Somewhere, children were learning to trust animal instincts that might save their lives. Somewhere, families were safer because one German shepherd had refused to let predators succeed in their hunting of the most vulnerable members of society. Emma's promise to become a police officer would take years to fulfill, but Sarah understood that Rex's influence would guide every step of that journey, ensuring that his dedication to protecting children would continue through someone who'd experienced firsthand what it meant to be saved by a dog whose instincts and loyalty transcended every limitation of age, health, or circumstance. In years to come, when Emma Chen took her oath as a police officer, when she partnered with her own canine companion, when she protected other families from predators who hunted in the shadows, she would carry with her the memory of an aging German shepherd whose final act of protection had saved her life and inspired a lifetime of service to others.
Some promises were too important to break, and some legacies were too powerful to end with a single lifetime. Rex had kept his promise to protect Emma, and Emma would keep her promise to protect others, because one dog had loved his family enough to give everything in their defense. Rex's story reminds us of something profound, that the bond between humans and animals transcends words, creating connections that can literally save lives. German Shepherds, with their unwavering loyalty and incredible instincts, represent the very best of what these relationships can become. They don't just guard our homes, they guard our hearts. The love between Sarah, Emma, and Rex shows us that our four-legged family members are never just pets. They're partners, protectors, understand us better than we understand ourselves. Their loyalty runs so deep that they'll sacrifice everything to keep us safe. If Rex's story touched your heart, you might find yourself wanting to strengthen that special connection with your own dog. There's something beautiful about learning to communicate more deeply with the companion who already knows your every mood and movement. Sometimes, the most meaningful relationships in our lives walk on four paws, and they deserve all the love and understanding we can give them in return.